What's up, guys? Jay Davis Drifting here. I have a new video here for you guys. I'm with both of my buddies, both of the Kyles right here. Say hi.
What's up?
So today we're going to be installing some lowering springs on a 2021 Hyundai Elantra Inline. Kyle just picked these springs up, and apparently nobody has made a video on this before, so we're going to make a video on it, and let's just get straight to it. All right, Kyle, so what do we have here exactly?
We got one of the rear lowering springs from Storm Spring.
Storm Spring? That's the brand?
Shock Racing Storm Lowering Spring. It's from Korea.
All right, Storm lowering spring for a Hyundai Elantra Inline. This is what you got here, guys.
So basically we're putting this in replace of the stock lowering spring in the car, or the stock spring in general. So,
Okay, and what's the drop on this supposed to be?
It's a 0.8 inch front drop, 1 inch rear drop.
Okay, well, let's get to it. What type of tools are we going to need for this install?
You're going to need a 14 socket wrench, 17 socket wrench, and a 19 socket wrench. It's decently easy, but you're going to have to fight a couple of things just to get it in there.
All right, well, let's get started.
All right, so the first thing we're going to do is you got a 17 on the bottom here. This is going to be your shock. So we're going to go ahead and break this guy loose. If I can get my tools in the right direction, we'll be all right.
So start with the bottom bolt, which is a 17.
Yep.
All right. All right, guys, bear with us. Kyle's using hand tools here. Why are you using hand tools? We have power tools.
Well, if somebody's going to have to do this, they're going to have to use hand tools most likely in their driveway.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, even though I got it on the lift, it's going to be easier to show using hand tools.
Right, yeah, definitely. Yeah, so we're just using basic hand tools here, guys, which would be pretty easy for anyone to do at the house on their own. Here, let's see what they're doing.
I'm just taking a little bit of tension off the shock so it'll set up.
so we can take out the bolt for the shock so it's free play. Just hang in there.
Okay.
Next we're going to be taking out the top bolt for the
Upper camber arm?
Yeah, upper camber arm. That way we can adjust this knuckle to come in and out so we have more room to get the spring out.
So next step would be take out the top camber arm, which is a 19 millimeter wrench and socket, or however you prefer to use it.
This part gets a little interesting. You got to put a little bit of oomph in getting this top bolt out. It gets a little bit pissy.
We're also using a short extension and a mallet to get that bolt out, just so it comes out without any damage to the threads.
So right now all they're doing, guys, is just popping this out just to make it a little bit easier while Kyle was supporting the knuckle. If he was not supporting the knuckle, everything would have fell. Do not do that. Whenever you guys take that bolt out, make sure you support the knuckle because it is the only thing holding it up at that point.
Last but not least, you're going to need a 13, and we're going to pull a 14. Sorry, we're going to pull the sway bar end link out from in here so that we can get the knuckle to push down and allow us to get the spring out.
So I don't know if you guys heard that or not, but he's removing the sway bar end link, which is a 14. And that will allow them to have some extra movement on that lower control arm and get that spring out. So this thing right here, guys, the spring right there, that's what we're trying to get out. And you just have to disassemble the knuckle far enough for you to be able to push the control arm down, basically.
Got it off?
Yep.
Might need the mallet.
Okay, so what he just did, guys, was get that sway bar end link bolt out. It was stuck due to the pressure from the other side. So we just got that popped out. Now the control arm should be free floating, basically, other than the spring. So what you see Kyle doing here is he's pushing down on the knuckle, and then he's wiggling that spring out. There, he's got it right there. Be careful not to hit that brake line, guys, because it could be pretty fragile up near that cramp fitting. So be careful whenever you're pulling that guy out. And there you have it. Let me see that. This is the stock spring, guys, that we were replacing with the
Shark Racing Springs.
Shark Racing 2021 Hyundai Elantra Inline. And again, this is supposed to be a half-inch drop in the rear?
1 inch drop in the rear.
1 inch drop in the rear.
So you're going to want to retain these top hat rubber bushings They will go on to your new springs to replace this one.
All right, let's grab the new springs. Are they the short ones or the long ones?
Small ones.
Small.
These guys?
Nope.
Nope.
Other ones.
So the thin ones.
Yeah, the thins are the rear, the bigs are the fronts.
All right.
Now keep in mind, this is for the, what is it, the CN7 multi-link rear. So this is the inline, and also the new ends have a multi-link rear also. So they should come apart basically the same, but I haven't seen what the end actually looks like yet. That's gonna be wrong.
All right, Kyle. So show people what you're doing here.
We're just placing these old top hats back into the new springs. That way they can.
That way they don't flop around.
Yeah. So these are basically just the rubber isolators. Make sure you definitely put those back in the original orientation, and you should be good to go.
Sometimes they can be a little pain.
They've got alignments on them. You know that, right?
Huh?
Here, let me see it. So the lower, you'll see right here, comes up against a stopper. So you want to align that stopper whenever you put these in here so that it doesn't allow the spring to spin around in a circle.
Gotcha.
Otherwise, it's going to bounce around and spin. Sits in there, and it doesn't allow it to spin around, so it'll sit still.
Perfect. Well, let's get this new one installed.
The other thing you need to watch is there is a small pin right here, and there is a hole right here in the center of the control arm. You can't really probably see it on the camera, but there's a small hole right here that pin sits in so that this rubber piece will not spin.
Yeah, I see it. So right there, guys.
Yeah, that'll make it so that this spring can't spin whenever it's sitting in there.
Perfect.
So, all right, she's installed. So now all we got to do is a reverse order of pulling everything apart to put everything back together. We're going to put the sway bar back in. We're going to put the upper control arm back on, and then we're going to put the shock back in place. And we should be good to go. Be sure and take the car in whenever you do this to get another alignment, because with the drop, it's going to throw your camber and everything else off.
So for the install, everything's going to be the exact same as the removal was, except in reverse order. So they got the spring in, and now Kyle is installing the sway bar end link. And then after the end link, what's going to be next?
We're actually going to attach the shock and then attach the upper control arm.
Okay.
The upper control arm requires a little bit of finesse to get back in place, because as you can see, the bushings are still really solid.
Right.
So it requires you to pick up on the knuckle and push down on the arm at the same time to align it.
All right. So that's some good information, guys. So whenever you're going back together, start with the shock, because that's going to kind of help hold the knuckle, which will make installing the lower or the upper control arm bolt easier as well. So this is kind of the difficult part that they were talking about earlier, and that's just getting the upper control arm bolt back in.
Okay.
The nuts on that side with the socket and the wrench. So once you get that other bolt back in, go ahead and tighten it all back up.
Woohoo.
Guys, and whenever you're doing this, try to find the correct torque specs for your vehicle and your make and model. This is the suspension we're dealing with here, so you don't want to over tighten anything, but then again, you don't want to under tighten something as well. So find the correct OEM torque specs and torque them as advised. And bam, movie magic, guys. The back end is done. So everything was simple. Again, rewind to the beginning of the video if you need help on the installation procedure. The exact same as the removal, just in reverse. Now the Kyles are moving on to the front end, which again is going to be super simple in this chassis because it's a McPherson style front strut. So you're going to have 3 nuts on the top, and then 2 bolts running through the knuckle and through the strut right there as well as a sway bar end link over there, and 1 ABS wheel speed bracket. Sway bar end link is going to be a 17 millimeter. So, start with this guy. Pull your sway bar end link out, move it out of the way. Then you're going to have 2 bolts again
Yeah,
through
12.
the knuckle here.
Try a 12 or 13.
Now, on these knuckle bolts here, guys, it's going to be a 19 millimeter and a 17. Now be careful to support the knuckle whenever you move this bolt as well. Same thing for the rear. The front end is going to try to drop down, but we still have the sway or the tie rod connected, so everything should hold itself up for the most part. Let's find out.
Shock's off.
There we go. Now the knuckle is separated from the shock, so all we got to do is remove the 3 nuts on top, and then she'll come out.
3 bolts on top are going to be a 14. Just going to bang those out real quick. Be sure on the last one that you grab a hold of the shock so it doesn't fall out. And lower her out. That's it. Now we're going to put the spring compressor on it, pull the top hat off, and change it out.
Now, Kyle, explain to the people what exactly the spring compressor does and where they can get one.
So we rented ours from O'Reilly's. Normally with our drift cars, we don't have to use them. But it's going to clamp on one side and the other side, and then it's going to run down and compress the spring so it takes the tension off the top hat. That way whenever we hit the top hat with the gun, we're going to be able to spin off the nut without it having any tension and launching the top hat off.
All right, sounds good.
Where do you want
Grab a hold of the actual bar.
So the Shark Racing new lowering front spring is actually short enough to where you don't have to use a spring compressor. So they were just able to slide it on top of the strut and bolt her down. Just got everything finished up on the 2021 Elantra inline. Let's drop it down and take a look at it. Whoo, buddy. Look at that. Just barely any fender gap. That looks good. We'll get it off the lift arms here. Roll her back on the ground and take a look at it. Well, that wraps it up for the Shark Racing lowering springs on Kyle's inline here. And about, let's see. Maybe 2 fingers of gap in the rear. And about the same for the front, guys. So, yeah, that looks really good. And I'm sure these springs will settle over time as well. But other than that, looks
I'll send
good.
you a picture of it this morning
What do you think?
before anything was installed.
All right.
And it looks a lot better. It had a major fender gap.
Did it?
It'll be really nice whenever they settle. And actually, if you look at the driver's side actually looks a little bit lower than the passenger side. If you go look at the driver's side,
Yeah.
it looks like the springs are sitting a little bit lower.
Could be.
Probably for my fat ass sitting in it. The shocks are kind of tilted a little bit to the driver's side, you know.
That's just for left turns. But yeah.
It's all set up. We got that NASCAR setup in it. Only make left turns.
But anyways, that wraps it up for the inline lowering spring install. Pretty simple job, pretty easy. We just wanted to make a video because nobody had one out there for it. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time, guys.